If you're coming into that market and then all of a sudden there's just huge amount of supply coming in, it just can totally change what you're going through. Part that's exciting about all of that is they're not problems that are that hard to fix. Like if you can find a market that's hard to develop in or hard to get approved, like that's an advantage.
Really good points. Turning those red flags into value add opportunities. Absolutely, man. Just make sure you dive into it. Again, it may or may not be a red flag that it's like a deal killer. It just might be a hurdle that you need to overcome and just figure out what needs to happen, how much it's going to cost, and how long it's going to take to do, and if it actually works for you or not. Welcome back, everybody, to the Self-Storage Income Podcast. You got me and George hanging out today. George, how the heck you doing, man?
Doing good, Connor. Excited to be here. Excited to talk self-storage on another podcast episode, man. Thanks for having me.
Dude, it's amazing, dude. It's amazing seeing the podcast grow over the years, the reach that we've had coming in here, talking self-storage, seeing people actually take that information that we talk about, go out there, actually implement it, and acquire facilities, improve their operations, whatever it is that they're doing, and truly be able to change their lives, man. It's been really, really cool to see. And like you said, man, just excited to be here, excited to be a part of it, and looking forward to our topic today, man, which is, it's a huge topic, something that's super, super important for people to know and understand when they're jumping into these facilities and into operations and really, you know, making sure that they're successful, and just looking at those big red flags, both in the markets and breaking it down to facilities. You know, what are those big red flags, those huge things that you want to look for that can help you determine whether it's something that you want to tackle, whether it's something that can be changed or not, if you want to work that problem into your value add strategy or not, or if it's something that you're like, hey, this red flag is too big, man, like I'm walking away, because that's another important piece, man. I know there's a lot of people out there that are so excited to get their first deal, to own storage, to operate it, and want to fall in love with the deal and don't want to look at red flags. So really important to highlight these things and, of course, make people know that, hey, if you see some of these things, it might be a good idea to walk away if you don't know how to tackle them.
Yeah, no, it's so important, and really trying to see these, you know, like the red flags and the issues that might come up. There's some that are obvious, but there are some as we go through today that you might not, they don't jump right out in your face. And so if you don't know what you're looking for, you're going to get so excited on the emotional aspect of like, oh, this is an awesome deal. But then when you dive into some of the data that we'll go through, it's so easy to overlook. And something that we really try to teach on the podcast, in the book, and everything that we do is that it's easy to put a value on the property that you buy, but what's the value on the properties that you walk away from? Because those can totally destroy you if you invest in something that you buy the deal and then you discover those red flags after the fact. And I know on the Cedar side, we've done that. Like we've had experience where we bought a deal and it's like, oh crap, it would have been nice to know this before. Like I think of like that lease example of like finding out half the tenants weren't on leases, you know what I mean? But not every red flag has to be something that you immediately run away from. For some people, it'd be like, hey, great, this is an opportunity for me this is an issue, but I can go and improve this. And so I think, you know, for people listening to this podcast today, our hope is to help kind of lay out some of the things that you should look out for and then determine for yourself whether you should address this or be like, no, it's too much. I don't want anything to do with this deal. I'm on to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much of it comes down to like the controllables and the uncontrollables too, right? Where it's like, hey, can you actually change this dynamic of the facility or that market? And sometimes you can't, sometimes you can. So we'll touch on some of these things too. All right, everybody, quick interruption. I wanted to let you guys know about our live event, SSI Live, going on this September the 16th through the 19th. It's going to be in the beautiful location just south of Bend, Oregon at the Sun River Resort. It's an absolutely phenomenal venue for this occasion. This is the premier self-storage event of the year. You're going to be able to be there live with me, with AJ, in a small, intimate environment, and it allows you to network with some of the best minds in the self-storage industry, from operations to remote operations to closing a facility to lending to structuring deals, everything in between. You're going to be able to get a start to finish understanding of exactly how to find deals, how to put them together, how to start owning and operating a self-storage asset from start to finish. You're also going to be able to hear from individuals who have been a part of our SSI community and membership, where They started with just one facility and being able to leverage what they know to do all these amazing things for them, their families, their futures by doing exactly what you're doing, listening to the podcast, coming to these events, being a part of this community. They even have some incredible activities that we can participate in while we're there. It's going to be anything from volcanic hiking to floating to horseback riding. There's all kinds of amazing opportunities to get outside of just the sessions, connect with other individuals at the event, because that's what it's all about. Bringing people together, building those relationships, being able to put deals together to fund them. So take a minute, click the link in the show notes below, go register, get your spot secured, and then of course, come back to the podcast. And first and foremost, let's talk market. And first bullet point is population. So declining population. Do you want to talk a little bit about why population's so important, why we like to see growth, and maybe some of the dynamics of, what people should be looking for if they've got a market they're looking at where there's either stagnant or declining population growth?
Yeah, for sure. And so as we're going through this, right, there's really two buckets we're talking through. It's going to be the red flags in your market and then the red flags specific to your facility. And so for now, we're diving into the market. And I think what's important with when you say controllables and uncontrollables, you can pick the market that you choose to invest in. That's in your control. But you have no control over what happens in that market. You can't control the population growth. You can't control if houses are being built. You can't control if another storage facility comes in. So choosing your market is incredibly important, because once you're there, you have no control over what happens from that point on. That's the first piece. And so talking through the population, of course, seeing a booming population is great. We have 5% population growth year over year. You love seeing those numbers and it's awesome. But another thing to look at that is with more people moving there generally leads to increased competition. And so how I look at population is it's not necessarily is this good or bad? It's what are the strengths and weaknesses to this? And so on the other side, if you have a declining population, first gut instinct is well, that's not good. People are leaving. But what I've learned is to always look at, don't just say, hey, this population is declining, don't invest there. Instead, ask, why is that the case? Mm-hmm. And so especially when you're looking at a storage market, it's not necessarily looking at the entire city, but a 3 to 5 mile radius or a drive time. And you might have one population growth for the northeast part of the city and another population percentage for the southwest. And another thing to look at with this population is that sometimes you'll see communities that are taking down houses or an apartment building and they're building businesses. And so that's going to show a decline in the population growth, but economic development is happening there. And so I think that's important to always be okay, yes, you want to know what the population and the growth is, but also what's beyond just that one singular data point.
Yeah, that's a really, really fantastic point to be looking at. And great to be looking, like you mentioned, at those pros and cons of even the positive growth. Sometimes looking at that and saying, okay, well, what is that positive growth going to actually do to the market? Are more people building or more people acquiring? If I'm going in to develop something or to expand a facility, what kind of strain is on the trades market in that specific market? Is it going to take me 2 times longer than I thought it would to build something because all the trades are busy and all the things? So really, really important stuff to be thinking about for sure. On our one-on-one coaching with Connor that we do, with one and only here, we had an individual that they were looking at a market to invest in that actually did have a pretty stagnant and super slow declining population. And that was a lot of the conversation, man. It's just really understanding what's causing that decline. And after diving into it a little bit, it come to find out the population of this smaller rural town, it was outside of a booming major metropolitan area, that kind of stuff. But this town specifically was kind of declining. It was a combination of individuals who were older and either passing away or moving away, and there wasn't younger individuals coming in there. So it was just kind of this slow attrition as individuals in that community. There was a huge percentage of them that were 40, 50, 60 plus. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but getting granular like that and understanding what's causing those things to happen is really important, because yeah, you're not going to be able to suddenly convince a lot of people to move to that town, unless there's some reason that it could be housing's cheaper, it could be housing's more available, it could be that more employers are coming in there, those different things. So those are really good things to also understand why a population's growing too, because you could find this quote unquote booming town and come to find out it's I mean, this is kind of an extreme example, but let's say it's like an oil field town kind of a thing where it's like suddenly, oil's booming, everything's going crazy. You've got 10,000 people that just moved there overnight for all this work. And then who's to say 6 months from now, the whole entire market and industry changes. And then suddenly that place is a total ghost town. So really, really important to be looking at both sides of the coin there, and really understanding the dynamics of both the downside and the growth, man.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what you're saying kind of ties into the next point as well, too, of talking about really the next two is overbuilt markets and then the economic diversity. And so like if you take that oil rig example, and it doesn't have to be that either. It could be like one major employer or a university or anything like that. But if your market is limited in the amount of jobs there, and not just the amount of jobs, but like, is it all through one company or one organization? Like if you're so reliant on that and all of a sudden that goes away, like you want to be able to understand who your customers are, meaning like your storage renters, to know like, how do these people make money? And is there new opportunities coming to that? And so to tie that back into population growth for a second, if the population growth is going down, but more jobs are being created, like it's not just individuals who rent storage units today, businesses also rent there as well too. And so I think like every metric has a role, but it should tell a story together as opposed to I only care about population growth or how many businesses are coming. Like you need to be able to correlate those with one another. And I don't think
Yeah,
there's one metric that rules them all to say in that.
for sure. Fantastic point, dude. Because yeah, you very well could have more and more businesses that have a need. And like we're always talking, man, that one thing, dude, that one thing that you should be looking for is demand. Is there demand for a specific unit type or utilization of self storage? And man, if you can find that need and there's huge demand there, and you can fill that need, that's a winning scenario there. So no, great point. You got to be looking at several data points, man. There's absolutely no one that rules them all. And you'd kind of mentioned this a little bit, but the overbuilt markets situation, dude. I mean, what do we always talk about? Self storage is the biggest threat to self storage. So, why is that, George? What happens when we go in and we overbuild markets?
Yeah, so now you talked about demand, and so the other side is just your supply. So and again, like these red flags are always magnified in smaller markets because it's really easy to tip the scale, but they still happen in big markets. But if you're in a small market and you have 100,000 square feet of self storage in the entire market, and then all of a sudden a developer comes in and they're like, I've owned this piece of property for these 3 acres for a year. I heard self-storage is a good investment. I'm just going to build storage. And they go and build 100,000 square foot facility. They've now literally doubled the amount of square footage in that market without knowing anything about the demand or the occupancy or anything else that's happening. And so why we say storage is the biggest threat to self-storage is that if people are just building and building storage and just without the operational and demand piece in mind, we're just going to have so much extra space for people to store their stuff that there's not going to be enough demand to balance that. And so now this ties like the metrics together. So like if you have a ton of storage development coming in and people moving away in a declining population rate, that's when you start to be like, okay, like now the story is being painted here where people are leaving and people are building storage. And if you tie that demand and the occupancy, which we'll talk about a little later, who's going to actually rent this? And then obviously that impacts your bottom line.
Dude, yeah, that's a dangerous scenario. It's that race to the bottom thing that you get into because, man, as soon as you have that oversupply situation or people having issues for whatever reason, with occupancies, dude, those rates start coming down. Those street rates start coming lower and lower. and you get further and further away from those revenue expectations that you thought and wanted to achieve and absolutely need to achieve, especially if you've got investors, you got lending, you got banks involved, all those things. You can't miss, man. It's super super important stuff. And dude, talking oversupply, man, real world example. This just blows my mind, dude. This was probably about 4 years ago. One of our larger facilities, it's over 100,000 square feet, and we had a vacant piece of property that was just to the north of us, with a storage facility coming in there. They were going to be kind of a different utilization. They were going to try to do some more of the, condo style storage and some of that. So it wasn't. They had some traditional storage, but it wasn't like huge competitor. But it was adding a ton of storage to that. Immediate radius that we had around that facility. And then not long after that development was underway, there was another developer that came in and proposed this other just monstrosity of a facility right across the road. All said and done, just to talk about how like clueless some investors and some development firms and some of these capital placers can be. They just don't know what they don't know, unfortunately, a lot of times. And this is why it's really important to do stuff like this and try to educate people. But all said and done, man, within that immediate area around our facility, talking right across the street from each other, there was going to be over 500,000 square feet of storage. Unfreaking real, dude. So we immediately started reaching out to planning and zoning departments, development departments for the city, all that stuff, and saying, hey guys, here's why this is really bad. Like, do not approve these things. Like, do not do this. Like, this is like an industry killer. Like, just explaining to them why that was not a good idea and how that oversaturation would lead to further complications, not only for the industry, but for that immediate area where it's like, does the city really want a bunch of vacant storage facilities? Like, where a bunch of riffraff are hanging out and all that other stuff? Like, no. The city needs people to go in there and to be successful and to, can't believe I'm saying this, but pay taxes. Can't stand those things. But anyways, real world example, man, of how just crazy it can be with oversupply. And, picking those markets, like you'd kind of alluded to in the beginning, where it's like you can pick the markets that you invest in and like what facility specifically that you're going to invest in or build and what that area looks like around you. What's the 1, 3, and 5 mile radius look like for that facility? And what does the zoning look like for those areas around the facility? Can somebody easily come in and just build? Or is it, you got grandfathered in decades ago and nobody else can build? Are you shielded in some way? Really, really important things to be looking for to help not only identify that current supply on the market right now, but being able to have that moat around yourself a little bit as far as future development. And also, again, we talk about this a ton, dude. Like, you've got to be talking to the cities and making sure that you understand all the developments in that market, that are underway or seeking approval and potential timelines for those things. Because, yeah, dude, if you go in and you're like, all right, man, market's crushing it. It's grown, 3%, and, this facility's full. And little do you know, you've got somebody that's a mile down the road because you're like, I'm going to do it remote. I don't need to go and see it, whatever. And you just are totally unaware of this 130,000 square foot development going on just down the road from you. That's in a market of 10,000 people or something. Dude, your whole entire business plan, your investment plan, everything could potentially go out the window, man. So, man, supply, man, that's super important.
Yeah, and I think like the example that you painted too is just like you can do all of your market research and feel confident going in, but it can still change 2-3 years after you own it. And so I like what you said about like if you can find a market that's hard to develop in or hard to get approved, like that's an advantage, as opposed to if it's like super easy to develop or you already see three properties that are permitted to build or whatever, those are the things to think about of what could this market look like 3, 4, 5 years from now. Because in all business, in all real estate really, but definitely self-storage, there's your intrinsic value of like, what can I go in and improve on the operations of this facility? So what can I can take my revenue from A and get it to B. And so you have more control over that. And then the market side, where it's like, how is this going to appreciate over time, or is there going to be no appreciation? It's just going to stay the same. But the market is the piece to that. And so, yeah, if you're coming into that market and then all of a sudden there's just huge amount of supply coming in, it just can totally change what you're going through. And that's why some developers, like, I know people who will they're like, I want to develop, or I know it's hard to develop, because once I can get in there, I know the competition is going to be so much more pushed away from being able to develop.
Those examples, man, and it just kind of touches on this other aspect of like making sure that you're building strong relationships with some of those individuals that might be in the planning and zoning departments of those towns and cities, and get involved, go down to city hall and meet those people face to face and have those conversations, and building those relationships. It makes a lot of those things a lot easier to talk about if there are troubles that come up and some of those things. So yeah, no, all really good points there, dude. And it just is really difficult that's just one of those things that you just can't change, man. Like once it happens, like it's done so. And there's no like magic number, but I know that we would typically look and see, if there was 15% or more new supply coming onto a market. For us, that was just getting to this tipping point where it was like, okay, well, how do we know what that absorption of that new supply is going to look like after 15% new supply? So that was one of those things that we would look at, and kind of one of our, I don't know if I'd call it a golden rule, but just metrics that we'd like, okay, if there's 15% or more new supply, that could potentially be one of those red flags where we're like, nope, we're going to walk away from that one.
Yeah, and I've heard AJ say that too. So like in other words, what Connor's saying is that if there is 15% more supply coming to your storage market, you can, up to 15%, you can do a decent job of forecasting what type of impact that will have to occupancy in the market. But once you get beyond that number, you're just guessing. And so like, if you're a developer and you're like, hey, I want to go and build a storage facility and I'm going to add 50% more supply to the market, like, we're not saying that could it work? Sure. Could it not work? Yes. But like the point we're making is that we feel like it's just a guess. Like you don't actually know if the market can absorb 50% more square footage to it. And so that 15 metric is like, because that comes in like Connor, we've done like value add expansions, and it's like we take that into mind. Like, okay, if we're going to expand and add more storage to the market, how much more are we adding, and how is that going to impact that? Because keeping the expansion piece in mind, like you have one game plan for how you're going to increase occupancy for the existing facility, and then a totally different game plan for the expansion piece because you're adding supply to it. And so, yeah, that 15% is kind of like the barometer that we fell on of this is where we can feel like we can actually do some legit underwriting to forecast that.
Next up, you touched a little bit on the economic diversity, talking about that diversification of employers, talking about diversification of economic resources, of growth. Do you want to touch on why that's so important?
Yeah. What it comes down to is, and it's kind of a good thought experiment anyway, never mind of storage, but you go vacation somewhere and you or you just go to a new city or a new area, and it's like, what is the economy doing here? Like, how do people pay their bills? How do they get jobs? From a diversity standpoint, it's like, how many different types of employers are here? Are there new businesses coming? Is 90% of the workforce all working for this one major company that's here? What happens if that company goes away? Or is it all government employees in that area? And so that's why you see people making such a big deal over like Amazon headquarters coming into a new part of the United States, because it's like, wow, it's going to create so many jobs, and that has like positive and negative consequences. And like storage is definitely an aspect of that, and like Amazon even more with storage, because that could lead to consumers using storage units, but also businesses as well too. And so when you look at the economic diversity, it's being able to understand what type of, revenue streams in this market are going to be able to lead to then trickle down to my storage facility from a renter level.
That can really help paint the picture on the utilization side too. Like, okay, well, these are the types of people that are in this area. This is, the jobs that they have, the incomes, all those things, which is kind of one of those things we wanted to talk about as well. And potentially, like, do they have a lot of expendable income? Are they buying the recreational vehicles? Is there a big market for that? And not only being able to identify, like, at an individual level what some utilization might look like from a storage perspective, but even, talking boats and RVs, like, are there boat and RV dealerships that are huge to that area that you could also potentially store their product for? Figuring out some of those utilizations and how you can really niche down and market to those specific people for those needs. That can be hugely insightful.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because like if you tie in the boat and RV piece, and to bring this all the way back to all the beginning points, like the people who are renting a boat and RV unit from you may not live there. They may be
Mhm.
driving through to get to where they're trying to go. And so they're not going to be a part of that same, 10-minute drive time as the way a storage customer will be. And then same thing, like you're saying, if it's a tourist area, there could be boat and RV dealerships there. And so that's going to have an impact on, like, you want to know that with your storage facility in case you have not even just the units, but maybe just extra land where you can allow people to park their boat and RV outside. That ties into the next part, which is the income and people having discretionary income. Because what happens where if you have a low income area, you fall into the place of where you're just competing on price. And it's like the only way to attract customers is just to give the best price point, the lowest price point. And so, which is a strategy, like you can do that, people do that. But we always focus on how do we provide the best value. And that's why we're looking at value add, because we're not trying to get the cheapest price in a market. We want to be able to buy a facility and show that, like, we're adding cameras and lighting and, making it feel safe for you, making it easier for you to access with remote automation. And therefore, when we go to increase our rents, we show why we're doing that.
Yeah.
And so the metric that we pay attention to is the median household income. And I had someone ask this to me on one of my recent calls of, like, do you look at median household income or average household income? I prefer median. If you can only get average, then it's still better than nothing. But if you take the average income, you may have the majority of people in that market are low income, but you have, a few percentage of people who make a great amount of money, and that totally skews the average household income. So I try to find
Mhm.
median. Of course, the higher, the better. I like to get feedback from different people in the industry. I've seen people say that they like to see it around $70,000 to $80,000 for a household. But what I would always go back to is don't just have, this is the one metric I care about and that's the only thing that matters. But you just need to keep in mind when you're looking at the household income, what you're really answering is what discretionary income do these people have that they can rent a storage unit? Like that's where you're trying to get at. So that
Mhm.
way you can determine, are your prices in line with the market? Is there room for you to increase based off of that? Or is it just like this, the market's tapped out where it's currently at?
Right, right. Well, and like you said too, man, that's really important to realize. Like, again, it's not just the one metric too, because I mean, you could look at, median household income being 70 or 80 grand in LA versus 70 to 80 grand in Boise, Idaho. Dude, totally different worlds. There's one that has discretionary income, and there's one that's like struggling to pay the bills. And great question from the community as far as like, hey, what do you look for, and how do you look for it? And that difference between average and median, like, that's a really really good point.
And so that brings us to the next point, which is our last one for the market is vacancy across competitors. And so when we talk about population growth, when we talk about economic diversity, when we talk about median household income, that has nothing to do with self-storage at all. Like the population growth has the same, like that's universal to that market. The median household income, whether you're looking at apartments or hotels or Airbnb storage, like the household income is the same, right? And so now when you start looking at the vacancy, that's when we really start getting into like, okay, what's happening with purely the self-storage? And the supply has an impact on that. So like, of course, new supply coming in, but what you currently are already at with your market demand as well too is going to have an impact. And so if you come in and you see a facility that you like, and you can see that you're like, oh, it's 20% under rates, I can come in and increase based on what the other facilities are showing, but I can increase my rates by 20%. That's only one part of the story, because if those other facilities are charging more than you, but they're all half empty, then it's like, well, what, even if you can match their price point on your website, that doesn't mean you're actually going to fill up the vacancy that you have. And so knowing what that overall occupancy is, and again, that could be by unit type too. Like your 10 by 10s could be crushing, but your 10 by 30s are totally empty. And so that's a huge piece to be able to understand, is what is the occupancy happening on a market level.
No, exactly right, man. I'm glad you touched on that because, yeah, you could find out that there's a specific unit type or utilization that's really in high demand in that market. But a lot of competitors, and maybe your facility too, just has this specific unit type or a number of them that the market just doesn't want. There's no use for the 5x5s, let's say in this rural small farm town. Like everybody wants the freaking gigantic units they can put all their toys in or whatever it is, recreational vehicles and things. And I mean, we've seen that in markets time and time again, dude. We had some issues with 10 by 20s at one of our facilities that the market, for whatever reason, just did not want 10 by 20s. Everybody take the 10 by 10s, 10 by 15s, 12 by 30s, whatever. It was just this discrepancy in that market where it was just people either wanted something bigger or something smaller than the 10 by 20. And so, yeah, just super interesting to really know and understand what that looks like. So you can go in and try to figure out how to work through that. And talking vacancy and identifying those things, a lot of times people have the question like, well, dude, how do I find out what my competitor's occupancy or vacancy even looks like? And so, I mean, I posted a video in our community a couple of weeks ago talking about secret shopping and exactly how that looked like, and what the process that I like to use looks like, and some of that to go in and get boots on the ground and actually go into these facilities, go into those competitors, talk shop, figure out their occupancy at a high level. Obviously, they're not going to print out a report for you, most likely, but be able to go in and get a good idea of where occupancies lie and where vacancies lie. And so you can do that by just going and secret shop in those facilities, by going in and looking for a storage unit yourself and seeing what they have and don't have, and the locations of those units and the quality and all the different aspects that go into it. Really, really important to be able to do that.
Yeah, you can't find that information online. You can't find, facility specific occupancy like that. You might be able to find if a unit type is sold out or if there's one left, but after that it's just going to say we have availability and you don't know how much. And then
Yeah.
you're not necessarily going to know where it's located on the facility as well too, because sometimes the issue is that it's like, well, the location of this unit sucks, so it never rents. And so like what you're showing in the video you posted to the community is like, those are the extra steps that the people who are successful in the industry are taking those steps to be able to get a full understanding of that. Because what the information you take from that ties right back into your underwriting and allowing you to get your confidence levels of like, can we actually achieve our business plan knowing the occupancy that the other facilities in this market are having?
And gives you a good idea, just a barometer of what you're going to do. Are you going to have to go in and shift unit walls? Are you going to have to go in and retrofit some different unit sizes? And something else we like to talk about too is don't just go and like pull triggers and guess, test some things out first. Maybe try to market a unit. Let's say you got some 5x5s that aren't doing well. Maybe try to just combine those units online or in your property management system to be, a 10 by 10 or whatever that might look like. However many units you can, and put together and see, are people biting? Do people actually want it before you actually go and move walls and change things and some of that. And so really good stuff there, man. We've hit a lot of really good points on the market. Now let's get even more granular, dude. Let's talk facility. Man, major red flag is visibility, location. You can't change that.
Yeah, for sure. It's like having a main road is amazing. People driving by you, having that, just like road traffic is great. The counter argument I would say though is that now your online presence matters more than ever. You could have not a great physical visibility, but I think the last number I heard is that 80% of renters today use their phone to rent a storage unit. And so it's twofold to that. It's like, of course, having a facility that has a great location is going to be a benefit to you. But again, that doesn't mean that should be the only factor that you're looking at for you, because if you can go in and improve your online visibility so that people, can find you on Google Maps, and when they do a Google search, your facility shows up at the top of the list. Like that's a huge thing that's a lever that you can pull. And especially in these smaller markets, it's not that crazy for you to come in as a new operator and immediately be the most sophisticated operator in that market. Whereas like now, if you go to a bigger market and you're dealing with public storage or extra space, like you have some real pro operators there. So that online visibility is arguably more important than the physical location, simply based off the fact that most people, when they want to rent a storage unit, are not going in their car and driving around looking. They're on their couch Googling self storage near me, and that's how they're making their decision.
Really important thing to keep in mind is making sure that your facility is recognizable and identifiable. If somebody is driving trying to find it, you do need to have signage, you need to have flags, you need to have the different things out there that really say, hey, yes, like we are here, kind of a thing, whatever that looks like for you. That we've seen a number of times too, like going back to these examples of like facilities being right next to each other and those kinds of things. Like, does a customer have to drive right by a competitor to get to you? Like, is there a dead end road that like somebody drives right by again, let's use a REIT, for example, like a public storage. Like, do they have to drive right by that to get to your facility? Things to really think about, because they just might be like, oh, hey, yeah, let me actually, like, I don't think it was public storage I was going to, but let me just swing in there and look at this guy real quick and do some price matching and this and that. And dude, yeah, when you're in markets that, may have those REITs and those things, that competition's heavy, man. They've got their systems dialed in. They've got a lot of processes. They've got a lot of resources. And so that can be really difficult for a private owner to come in and to compete with, which is, another benefit going back to like signage and branding and some of those things. We get this question of like, should I, from the community, a lot of times it's like, do we, if we're buying more than one facility, do we run it under one brand or multiple brands? And I'm always like, dude, like one brand all the way. Like, don't make your lives any harder than it has to be. And again, going back to the real estate aspect, I love the thought of that online presence and that online real estate being really important, but also like that online market share as well. Like, what's your footprint as a brand online in that market? And that was something that I'd heard Lance talk about, Lance Watkins at 10 and Eke a long time ago. And I was like, man, that's a really smart thing to think about. And I've considered that ever since. And I mean, that was a huge reason that all the guys started Store Local back in the day, to bring private ownership together to really compete at a brand level and a marketing level with some of the REITs. So visibility, access, all those things really important, man. If somebody's having a hard time seeing your facility, finding it on a map, if you got Google Maps, taking them to some other entrance that doesn't work and taking them around a subdivision or something, like, we have totally seen that happen at our facilities. Like, again, stuff that you've got to be looking at, making sure that if somebody's typing in your facility and they click it on the Google map, that it leads them to your front door. So really good stuff.
Part that's exciting about all of that is they're not problems that are that hard to fix with your, like if you discover that issue with like your Google Maps address is leading to the wrong location, like you can fix that. Or if you're in acquisition mode and you're looking to buy a property and you see a facility with those issues, like, great, like that's something that you can come in and improve upon, as opposed to the physical location. Like, that is what it is.
Yes, dude. No, really good points. Turning those red flags into value add opportunities. Absolutely, man. Another huge flag, man. I was actually just posting to one of our guys in the community recently on this deferred maintenance thing. He was looking at a facility and vacant facility. It was kind of a lease up thing, and but it was like super old. I was like, all right, man. Like one of the things, it's going to be that deferred maintenance aspect or the capex part, and not only what it's going to look like from a cost perspective, but also a timeline perspective for you to execute that and actually start being able to like lease up units and operate the property and ultimately break even and start cash flowing at some point. So, man, some things we've seen from a deferred maintenance standpoint, dude. I mean, we've seen all kinds of stuff. We've seen drainage issues. We've seen HVAC problems, roof problems. You know, a lot of times those roofs used to be, and even nowadays, there's a couple different styles of roofs that you'll see a lot of times on metal buildings. You've got the standing seam, which is, you know, it like clips in, clips together. It's not like a fastener built roof where that's the other pieces. You've got the standing seam versus the fasteners, and the fasteners are legit just screws with these little rubber washers on them that they screw into the tops of the roof. And as you would imagine, these rubber washers on all these screws get dried out over time and end up rotting, and then you end up having all these leaks going on, and you're getting roof replacements, and you're getting caulk put on all these screws, and there's all these just problems that come from having the fasteners. Not to say that you can't have them. We've got facilities to have them, but it's one of those things that you're going to have leaks. You're going to have that deferred maintenance aspect there, where if that's an old facility that you're looking at, it's got that fastener thing going on the roof. Like really make sure you evaluate that, see what it looks like, see what it's going to cost to fix, and make sure that, you know, day one, you don't move in, you know, transfer the facility over to you. You have a rainstorm and then you've got 200 tenants in your office. Like, hey, dude, my entire unit's destroyed because your roof's leaking. So really important things to look at, man. Deferred maintenance, roofs are big. That's kind of a big one that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, what Connor's diving into here is like nitty gritty operation stuff too, of like really looking at what type of roof is it in this, you know, going through the fasteners, and because what can happen is the red flag for this is you find a facility, you're like, oh, I got a great purchase price for this. I locked in a deal, but then you need to understand like, well, what budget are you doing for your deferred maintenance, and like to define deferred maintenance as well for anyone who's brand new, just learning about storage. Like those are issues that you might not have to solve the day that you buy the facility, but they are certainly things that you should budget for in the next, you know, the timeline could change. Like your roof issue, you could think is 2 years down the road, and all of a sudden 6 months down the road. But
We've seen
with an
that.
older facility, you need to be able to understand like, what am I budgeting for this? And like you can
Mm-hmm.
like having an inspection when if you get a property under contract is a huge thing that you know, often banks will require it anyway. But even if not, it's something we always recommend because it allows you to see like, what issues do I need to be prepared for? And it also could then be something that you can go back and negotiate a lower price on if if you think the roof is in shape just off the images, and then you get an inspection person to go out there and you see it's a far greater issue. Other things that you could look at too is like poor drainage, like with the aisles and storage. Like we always see that they cave towards the center, and then you have like a sewer in the middle or something. But what you don't want to have is if the grading is off and the water leaks back into the storage units, that's going to ruin everyone's stuff. And so making sure that you have, you know, ways to get water going away from the facility or into the sewer system, because otherwise, yeah, you're gonna be dealing with people like they store their belongings in there, their stuff gets ruined, they come back, they're upset, you get negative Google reviews, and it just is ripple effect from there.
Yeah, yeah. Another big thing, man, is like unit doors. Go through open vacant unit doors. Make sure that those things function. Make sure they work well. Look at all the door seals on the bottom and around the edges. And I mean, man, if you're going to have to go in and replace a bunch of doors or door seals, that's another thing. Like some of those really old doors, they might not even make the door seals anymore that fit the bottom of the doors. Like there's all kinds of things that are really really good to look at. Those unit doors are another big one from a deferred maintenance standpoint, making sure that that stuff's all squared away. And then, yeah, I mean, if you end up buying a facility that's got some kind of issue going on where you're going to have to mitigate things like asbestos or other hazardous materials, those kinds of things, just make sure you dive into it. Again, it may or may not be a red flag that it's like a deal killer. It just might be a hurdle that you need to overcome and all those things. So just dive into those things, figure out what needs to happen, and figure out again how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take to do, and if it actually works for you or not.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean that even ties into the environmental and structural things. Our next topic, man, that's a big one. You can't, a lot of times on the environmental side, that can be a deal killer a lot of times, dude.
Yeah, the best thing I would say with that is work with experts. Like even for our community, we bring on people who do the environmental reports. We brought on a geologist in the past to talk about environmental reports, because you have your phase one, which then will tell you whether or not you need to do a phase two, and then that, there's cost to getting both those studies done, and then it's like either, hey, you need to take action steps to resolve this issue. And those are things that, like, the land is the land. Like it's really hard to change on that. And banks will make their decisions based off those reports as well too. Especially if you get into something where it's like there used to be a gas station there or something like that, you can get into real issues that are very much deal breakers that you don't move forward on.
Yeah, they'll sink the ship, man. A lot of those things are just so costly and so big that it can be a big problem. But again, you've got to dive into it. You got to understand, have those experts looking at those things, and the structural side. I mean, it makes me think of, there's a lot of talk about conversions, even still, going in and converting, big box stores or other structures into self storage. And one of those things was core drilling the existing concrete, in that structure. Did it have the requirements for the load capacity that storage requires? Because a lot of times you'll find that it actually doesn't, and you're going to have to reinforce the floors in some way or the structure in some way to actually meet code for storage as far as the load capacities go. So really, really important to be working with those experts and making sure that every detail is being looked at, especially on conversions, man, because you don't know what you're walking into.
Yeah. Well, like a Kmart was built to be a Kmart, not a storage facility like that. And so it's just understanding and saying that, knowing that we've done multiple conversions. So it's just understanding like what you're getting yourself into to do that. Because again, every red flag is also the potential to be an opportunity, but you just want to be able to proactively address what situations could come up and then have a solution for it.
Yep, exactly. Oh, dude, I don't know why you put this bullet point in here, but unrealistic pricing or cap rate, we never see that.
Yeah, obviously this is an important one, but the reason, like, you cannot go in and change the price that you paid for something. Like your brokers will call it your basis, your going in basis, and you can change the rates that you charge. You can add units to your property, you can add tenant insurance, you can even refinance to get a different interest rate over time. So like all these things can be changed, but you can't change the price that you bought it for. And so we see so often that, storage is, become more and more popular throughout the years, and people would say like, well, if I buy this facility, it'll just go up in value over time. Or you'll see sellers who are like, well, here's what I can get everything. I'm going to sell it for this price because I know that's what it's worth. But they're not factoring in the work that needs to be done in order to get it to that point. And so, yeah, being able to understand, like, if I buy this at this price today, what is it going to be 3, 4, 5 years from now, based on what we focus on is what we believe we can do from an operational standpoint, as opposed to just saying that it's going to increase in value over time.
No, really important, man, because I think a lot of people do, especially as just starting out, since cap rates are like this big thing in the real estate industry. They do get caught up and hung up on the cap rate a lot of times. And that's, stuff to be taken into consideration and into account for sure. But really, it's just like, man, you need to look at your underwriting. Like, where's the facility at? Where do you think it can go? What are your expenses going to be? And not getting too caught up in that. And obviously, making sure that whatever price that you're paying really actually pencils for that facility. Because, dude, we even still see that a lot right now, where there's still a little bit of that discrepancy between, initial asking price and what the facility actually ends up selling at. And a lot of times that actual sale price ends up being a little bit lower than where, they started the listing. So again, that's not everything, but that's a lot of what we've seen. So make sure you're putting in those offers, man, even if it's a lot lower than what the initial asking price is or posted price is, whatever. Make sure that you're submitting those offers and trying to make deals happen, because deals don't just exist, man. You got to make them.
Well, and that's not just us saying that. Like I've had multiple brokers like ask us to do that because they're saying when buyers submit offers, it helps show the realities of the market because sellers will see purchase prices or facilities that were sold a few years ago and think that they can still hit that same number in 2025. And so brokers are asking, like, if you like this property, don't just take the list price as that's what it's worth. Like that is just a number to start with, but do your underwriting and submit an offer based on the number that makes sense for you. They still might say no, but if there's $1 million property and you think it's worth $500,000, you submit that offer. And then from there, like that property could still be there 3 months, 6 months, 9 months from now. And now that owner is like, do they want to stay and hang on to it at that price? And so that's where it really comes into like, do the underwriting in a way that makes sense for you, as opposed to just thinking they're only ever going to take the price that they've listed it for.
Yep. No, exactly right, man. Really good points there. Let's talk unit mix, man. From a couple different perspectives. Unit diversification or lack thereof can be a huge red flag. Can be hard to navigate if utilization or demand for that utilization changes. And then having some of those random unit configurations, having a lot of random unit types that maybe the market doesn't typically have. Instead of having all these standard unit sizes like 10 by 10s, you've got, this 13 by, 15 or whatever it is that just isn't familiar to people, which can be, when people aren't familiar with things, it can be harder to navigate and attract people to that product. So really important to look at and to consider that unit diversification. We've had facilities that were just, large boat RV facilities. And man, I'm telling you, like when those unit types get hit with those swings in demand for recreational vehicles and the storage for those things, man, that facility gets hit hard from an occupancy and revenue standpoint.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I'll say with the odd unit types as well is that when you're looking to buy a property and you're trying to do some competitor rate tracking, so like say you have a bunch of 5x7s and everyone else in your market is a 5x5 or a 10x10, like you can, it's easy to overlook what the other people are charging, because if you're just looking for 5x7s, you're like, oh, well, I'm the only one, so I can charge whatever I want. But I'm always like, look at the things that are at least close to you, do the best you can with that, because you need to be able to have some number to go off of. And then, yeah, if your unit mix, like some facilities are like, we have one 5x7 and then one 5x6 and then a 13x12. And they're just like very few quantity of unit types, but so many different actual types. And that becomes really hard to do, competitor research and to build your heat map, and I think you're normally seeing that with older facilities. I feel like from a development standpoint, I don't want to say it's 100% going away, but like most facilities that are being developed now are more of those standard unit types, at least from what I see. But there's still a lot out there that were built in the past that are just all over the place. And so you just want to be able to really know, like, okay, I might have this weird unit type, but others in that market don't. So how can I make sure I'm building my heat map in a way that still makes sense?
Really, really good stuff, man. Talking more from like the units perspective, another huge red flag and something from a facility standpoint is the high occupancy, but yet high delinquency thing. We've seen this happen in the past where owners, let's say a seller, maintains a really high level of delinquency. They're not running auctions, they're not kicking people out, all those things, because they're looking to sell and they want to show a high occupancy. That's something where it's like, don't just look at the occupancy. Again, going back to looking at multiple factors and considering things, multiple data points, is making sure that you're not like, oh man, this facility, it's super full and everybody else is. If you see that competitors and everybody in the market's full, that's a really good place to be. But as you're working through, due diligence, you want to make sure and get those aging reports and identify okay, they've got good occupancy, but where's their delinquency at? And what's driving that occupancy if it is good? And I mean, we've seen it where we've acquired a facility that was supposed to be almost 60% occupied, and it's like mid 40s. So that can dramatically change your business plan, promotions that you're running, and the revenue that you're going to achieve, and the time frames that you're expecting it. There's a lot of dynamics that can occur if you run into that.
Yeah, and like the simplest way to put this when I look at occupancy is that like when you look at occupancy, it really doesn't matter as to like how many units are rented as opposed to how much money are you making. Like this is like
Mm.
you are in a make money business. That is why people get into business. And so if you're 100% occupied but 50% of the people are paying the bills, that just means you're letting people store their stuff and you're not charging them or not going out to go through your collection process and go through the auctions and everything. And so that's why like now it's always what's the physical occupancy, but really it's the economic occupancy that we pay attention to because you want to know how much money is coming into the door. And so yeah, it's very easy to skew those numbers. Another thing is like owner occupied units. Like how many of these units are just not even available for sale right now, and being able to factor that in. And so you could have a simple conversation of like, well, I have 100 units, and then you find out that 5 of them are owner occupied and 7 of them are broken, so you can't even be used. And so now you're down 12 right away. Then you get how many of those rentable units are actually being rented, and then are they being charged the right price for it?
Yeah.
So huge issue. And the nice thing though is that like if you can then implement a practice where you're like, hey, we're charging late fees and we're staying stern with this because we want to reward our good paying customers, that is extra income on your bottom line once you can dial in those processes. So
Oh, phenomenal points, man. Things that you've got to be taken into consideration and planning for. Because again, yeah, it's super dynamic, dude. It's not just a one size fits all thing, and you got to be looking at all the angles and figuring out how you're going to attack those things as you work through it. So, really good points, man. One of the other things, and last but not least, a really big deal killer that can take place. And this is a facility. I see this as being kind of like a facility and a market thing because we talked a little bit about oversupply and some of that. Talked about population and some of those things too, where you see this correlation. You see this declining rates and declining occupancies, which can be really, really bad. So yeah, that's saying that there's this race to the bottom. People are having occupancy issues, so rates are reducing in that market, and with that, if you're also seeing those occupancies declining, there's a lot of time. I mean, depending on what's going on in the market, there may or may not be a floor to that, and it may or may not ever recover.
you definitely see that with REITs in that they are just so willing to drive that rate down to the bottom because they know they'll make up for it over time.
Oh
And
yeah,
so you really want to make sure you're paying attention to what your competition is doing in that market and that you are understanding their overall business strategy because you'll see a major operator they'll do a promotion, a crazy promotion, like, get your first 3 months for the cost of 1 month or whatever. But they're trying to lower their customer acquisition costs so they can increase their lifetime value, knowing that they're going to give them multiple rent increases. They're going to spike that up. And so being able to know, like, okay, you can see those street rates going down or the web rates and all these discounts that they're doing, but understand that there's things happening behind the scenes that have, a greater impact. And so, yeah, that happens. And then the other part too is it might not be promotions. It could just be a market issue that people are just not as enticing to use self storage right now in that specific market. So people are having to cut rates to get people in the door.
exactly, man. And this is another thing going back to secret shopping. It's like you're not going to just find the answers to a lot of these questions online. I mean, you might find some news stories or whatever, but figuring out specifically with your like competitors in that market or what will be your like competitors and going in secret shopping, being like, oh, wow, you've got a ton of those 10 by 10s. Okay. Like, why is that? You got a lot of people moving out or something. Like, oh, yeah, well, Tesla's moving to Texas. So everybody's freaking out. Like, So, I mean, it's really important to know what and why those things are happening. If you're really serious about investing in that market and really just, pulling back the layers, man, diving in, playing investigator, and figuring out what's happening and why.
I think too, like we've been going over an hour diving through all of this, and like the topic is red flags. So naturally, we're going to be talking about negative things or things that you need to be looking out for. But I think something that we are, we pride ourselves on with self storage income is that we want to be real about the industry. Like we love storage. We think it's a great asset class, but every single business venture, real estate and beyond, has things that you need to look out for. And so listening to something like this hopefully allows you to be like, okay, I have these red flags that I need to see, so that way I'm aware of them. Like the worst red flags are the ones that you have to deal with the consequence of that you didn't realize was there. And so if you can understand what to look for and then either steer away from it or say, hey, this is something that I'm willing to deal with, it puts you at a so much further advantage in the people who aren't investing the time to educate yourselves on things like this. And one last thing that I'll add for a simple way to kind of filter these red flags, especially on the facility level. The market level is a little different there's so much less you can control. But if you see issues with the facility, separate between like, is this a physical issue or an operational issue? Because most of the time, if it's an operational issue, that is an opportunity. If your website sucks, if you have poor reviews, if the market occupancy is great, but your occupancy is not doing well, like those are things that you can come in and be a better operator and fix. But if you have roof issues or like everything that Connor is breaking down with, like it's this type of roof, or you have drainage issues or a bunch of doors, you need to budget for those things. Like those are hard costs that you need to factor into your underwriting. So breaking out that physical and operational is really a good way to be like, what am I confident enough? What risk am I willing to move forward with, knowing the red flags here?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal point. That's a great way to really figure out, again, figure out what's going on and why and how you're going to potentially work through those things once you acquire the property. So, dude, phenomenal stuff. Love it, man. This has been a fantastic episode. For all you guys out there listening, if you got value from this, please leave us a review. Just a quick thing. It could be one word, great, whatever. Leave us those reviews. Really helps us out a ton. We love seeing those things come through. And make sure, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, comment with your questions, any of those different things. Make sure you check out the links in the description, all of that as well, for resources and things going on in our self-storage income world. Love connecting with you guys. So yeah, outside of that, man, George, thanks so much for an amazing episode, man.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.
See you guys.